Hello everyone, I'm Farhani Momotaz. I'm a master's student at Penn. I'm presenting our work Understanding Screen Readers Plugins. This work is done in collaboration with Touhidul Islam, Ehtesham-Ul-Haque, and Professor Syed Billah. Our paper is centered around two components, plugins and screen readers. First, I'll briefly describe what plugins are. Plugins are small pieces of code that a user can download to extend a software's built-in functionalities. In web browsing, the use of plugins is very common. For example, I use AdBlock Plus in my browser to remove distracting ads. Plugins are also known as add-ons, add-ins, extensions, or scripts. The next component is a screen reader, which is an assistive technology for people with vision impairment, especially for blind users. Screen readers narrate on-screen visual content serially and support keyboard shortcuts to interact with an application. Three most popular screen readers are JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver in desktop. Like many applications, screen readers also support plugins, and some plugins are shipped with screen reader by default. To the best of our knowledge, there is no study in understanding the user experience, usability, lifecycle, and design implication of screen reader plugins. In this paper, we filled this void. More specifically, we asked, why do blind users use screen reader plugins? How screen reader plugins are developed, maintained, and distributed from the standpoint of the users. To that end, we conducted a study with 14 blind participants. The interviews were semi-structured and performed remotely over Zoom and phone calls. In the next following slides, I will present our findings. We found that blind users use screen reader plugins for the following reasons. First of all, plugins can make applications more accessible. In this regard, one participant said, when I use a software and I find it inaccessible through NVIDIA, I start searching for plugins. Second, plugins can modify screen readers' existing features. For example, one participant mentioned that Zoom with NVIDIA is too chatty. It announces each event during a Zoom meeting, like someone enters or leaves, someone mutes or unmute themselves. In this regard, a plugin lets him configure which notification he would like to listen. Third, plugins can provide audio feedback on keystrokes and shortcuts. For example, a popular copy shortcut Ctrl-C does not provide an audio feedback on NVIDIA. With a plugin, it can provide an audio feedback like copied or nothing was copied when Ctrl-C is pressed. Fourth, plugins can offer personalized shortcuts. For example, one of our participants who is a chess player created a plugin to introduce a personalized shortcut like Ctrl 2 to report the position of a piece backward, like the king is at 2e versus the king is at e2. We learned how screen readers plugins are developed. Plugin development is mostly an altruistic act. Only a handful of people develop plugins, and they are well respected and well reputed in the blind community, so much so that they are recognized by their first name. Most plugin developers do not monetize their plugins. In fact, there is no easy way to monetize plugins. We also learned the challenges of developing plugins. Developing a plugin is technically demanding. It requires a background in computer programming, and unfortunately, most programming IDEs and compilers are not accessible. Furthermore, plugin developer guides are too extensive to follow. And finally, all participants wished to develop their own plugin, but the complexity in this process is prohibitive. The study also revealed how plugins are distributed and deployed. Most screen readers do not have centralized plugin repository. Only NVIDIA has a community add-ons page, but the number of add-ons is inadequate, and no such page exists for other screen readers. Because there is no centralized repository, finding the right plugin is challenging. When participants find a plugin in ad hoc manner, they mostly rely on Google search. They also communicate with other fellow blind users and share plugins in zip files. Participants mentioned that installing plugins is easy. They only require pressing enter on a plugin file and restarting the screen reader. Uninstalling plugins is tricky and unlikely because to uninstall a plugin, the user needs to remember its name. However, most users forget the name of a plugin after some time. In another word, which plugin does what. And finally, more than half of our participants were bilingual, and they mentioned that plugins for supporting dual language is inadequate. We also learned that once a plugin is distributed, it is hardly maintained or updated. Some plugins do receive update in NVIDIA community page, but often cause
It's 11 o'clock.
compatibility issues. Besides, most third-party plugins are of poor quality. The participant needed to install several plugins to find the right one. And because of no maintenance or update, most plugins become obsolete after some time. Plugins have their downside too. Poor documentation is one of them, which includes very brief description of plugins functions, inadequate descriptions of shortcuts and how to configure them, and change log in many newer versions of plugins often does not exist. Another pain point of plugins is they introduce new shortcuts which can be challenging to memorize. Sometimes new shortcuts conflict with existing shortcuts. As I mentioned before, configuring these new shortcuts can also be challenging due to poor documentation. Plugins have security concerns too. Due to unstructured distributions and a lack of quality control, users can mistakenly download malware as a plugin. For example, one of our participants was a victim, giving away the full control of his computer to a hacker who provided an executable file in the name of a plugin. To prevent such incidents, participants develop their own vetting mechanism, such as rely on the feedback of trusted friends, checking the history of a plugin developer, downloading plugins from the well-reputed developers, and looking for typos and inconsistencies in a plugin's documentation. Based on our findings, we make following recommendations. Many users are not aware of the benefits or the dangers of plugins, so we believe there is a big value in educating them about plugins. We also believe that there is a dire need for a central repository for all screen readers plugins. This repository should support a community rating for each plugin and developer. For example, 50 people found this plugin helpful. Moreover, engaging third-party developers and develop a mechanism to monetize plugins is equally important. Furthermore, we recommend to make the plugin's development a simple, less technical, step-by-step process so that individual blind users can make their own plugins. And finally, accessibility researchers can focus on improving the plugin-based distribution model and deliver their research prototype as plugins. So here is a quick recap. Thank you everyone.